Congressman Hoekstra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the panel for being here today. I guess I'm not buying it yet in that things have improved all that much since September 11. If you go back through the history, it appears that information sharing has been a long-term problem. The bureaucracies have put in a number of different mechanisms to try to deal with that over the years, signed memoranda of agreements with other agencies, the use of detailed employees to other intelligence and law enforcement agencies, participation in joint task forces, attempts to design and field common databases. Governor Gilmore, in your work of your committees, have you gone back and taken a look at how long information sharing has been a problem in these different types of mechanisms and their effectiveness in improving the situation?
Congressman, I don't think we're buying it either. We think that much more needs to be done in order to be able to share information. We were alert to it when we began our commission back in January of 1999 and began to inject it into our reports, which of course were submitted to the Congress and to the President. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we're a congressional advisory panel. We're established by your statute, and we have been here to give you this information. We've been very happy with the congressional attention that we've received, and hopefully we've been of help to you. With respect to this issue, though, it's been true from the very beginning. I think, Congressman Hoekstra, I would make this point, and I think we have made this point in our commission. The challenge is not so much technical and even good wishes of people that want to meet together on task forces and so on. There is a cultural difficulty that we have to confront. And the cultural difficulty is that organizations that gather in intelligence don't share that information. They don't share it because of turf issues, because of frankly, the system that we've always had of holding things secure. And if you give it out to somebody else, there's a risk that it will be released. And as a result, we have cultural, institutional resistance built into this. And I think that is what has to be confronted.
Can you explain, can you explain to me how the Fusion Center will work in a way to address those issues so that if a joint committee is sitting here in 2 or 3 years, it's not the fifth one will be Fusion Center, another failed attempt at, information and data sharing? What makes the Fusion Center a solution rather than another Band-Aid?
The theory under which we are working and beginning to develop for our final report would be that you would begin to take counterterrorism information from all the different intelligence agencies and put them in one place where a group of people can look at it from that basis, instead of it being ad hoc, instead of it being separated out through this culture of separation and lack of information. Put it together in one place and give one body of people a chance to look at that. And that would facilitate the opportunity, not necessarily the conclusion, but the opportunity for communication with states and locals as well. And they need to give information and to get information. Quite frankly, much of the information as to what's going on within the communities out there, suspicious activity and so on, isn't even in the federal government. It's in state officials and local law enforcement people.
Ambassador Taylor, you talked about, I think in your testimony or in the interviews that you've given to the joint staff, you talked about the ability to perhaps have helped the FBI. Why would it be that in the year 2001, the FBI would not have seen your resources within the Department of State as being a significant asset in helping them find these individuals that they put on the watch list?
I don't know that the FBI doesn't see our resources as a significant help to them. I suspect that in this particular case, an agent was following the leads that he was given and didn't see a need at that time to ask for that assistance. I've learned over the years that in the investigative community, sometimes we don't realize how much capability is out there to help us until we ask. And experience goes a long way in learning who can help you get these things solved. So I don't know that there's a reluctance by anyone in the FBI to do it. It may just be that the individual asking that question didn't understand how we could be brought to bear to help him solve that problem.
So they didn't understand your capabilities, or they do understand your capabilities? Because earlier you said that, you know, you would now ask the question, you would now ask the FBI the question. You wouldn't just receive the information and say, okay, we'd now ask them the question. If they weren't in any urgency or whatever, you'd probably get the same response and don't worry about it, just, you know, go through your normal procedure and don't put it on a priority. Is that what you would have expected to happen?
Well, today we would ask the question, why are you asking us for this information? Because of our responsibilities for visa fraud. And should we be joining you in this, this effort that you're engaged in? Indeed, our agents that are now at the 19 Joint Terrorism Task Forces, their primary reason for being there is to make sure that when inquiries come up involving visas in a terrorism investigation, they are there and available to help support the investigation, not as an afterthought, but as an integrated part of that investigation.
Commissioner Norris, both before the hearing and in your testimony, you indicated, I think, a level of frustration that perhaps you may have seen some improvement, but it's not anywhere where you think it needs to be for you to do your job effectively. Is that accurate?
That's quite accurate.
You're not buying it either?
I don't buy it at all. I don't, and you know, Governor Gilmore is right, is right on the money. This is, frankly, the discussions that I've been hearing for the last year, it's been frustrating to me and others in my position because, frankly, most of the discussions are for people that they just don't get it. There's a lot of discussion about the technology and access to database and all that. This is not, it's just not the way to do it. This is exactly what we're looking for, is a fusion center, an intelligence center, something like that, because, frankly, as much as we need the information to be given to us, because, you know, we learned about the orange alert the way everybody else in America did on television. And we need to know not only why we're at this level of alert, but, you know, excuse me, that we are, but why we are. You know, do we look up? Do we look down? We don't know what we're looking for, number one. And the fact is, as was just stated, we're the biggest gatherers of intelligence in America. I mean, in my city alone, we arrested 100,000 people last year. We stopped 235 people who were given receipts called stop tickets. We took their identification. We know who they are, where they live, what car they were driving, what they said. We have many investigations going, narcotics investigations. We have wiretaps up all over the city. We have cameras, intelligence cases going. We can't even share this with anybody who needs to see it. And frankly, we're the biggest collectors. It's not the federal government. We're the ones, we want to give it away and we can't. And the fact that we can't give this away is frustrating because we can tell when people move from one cave to another in Afghanistan. We can't tell when they move from one row house to another in Baltimore because no one's looking at our information. I mean, if someone's wanted in Florida, wouldn't you like to know he was stopped in Maryland for a traffic stop, was arrested, was given a ticket because he was suspicious by the local police? This information's out there and no one's looking for it.
What information do you have or receive on the different federal databases that are out there and that are available? Are you sometimes surprised as the databases that maybe if you're watching a hearing or participating in a hearing say, I didn't know that information was available?
Sometimes it's that we don't know it's available. The frustration sometimes, though, is that, you know, as investigators, we're looking beyond the horizon. We see things that are suspicious to us. We want to go further in our investigations. And what's frustrating us many times is the tendency to figure out 40 reasons why we can't call this a terrorist investigation or there's no reason to look at this any further, when the fact is you should be looking even further when you get stuff that I discussed in the beginning and not figuring out every reason why we should be discarding this just because there is, you know, one of the things asked me by the local media when we uncover this group of people who may or may not have be a support cell or an operational cell, I don't know what they're doing. But their statement to me was, well, the 90-base watch list. So I was like, oh, you mean the list that like bin Laden's going to provide to the American government of people who are here for like the last 15 years? It's a ridiculous proposition. We need to be looking at everything that's being worked on around this country. We've had people photographing and sketching the Inner Harbor in Baltimore. We brought them in. They're in federal custody now. Some are being deported. Shouldn't the police in New York know about this, in Philly, in Boston? Wouldn't they all like to know just in case they had similar activity on the same day, which in our case was the 4th of July? This is the stuff we need to be sharing, and it's not going to be done by database. It's going to be done by us talking to each other, sitting in the room over coffee, because that's how all the work is done in law enforcement. If you're not sitting there every day talking to each other and discussing yesterday's events, it's not going to happen.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether the answer is something along the lines that Senator Wyden has has proposed or that the Commission will propose from Governor Gilmore, but I believe another Band-Aid approach in 2002 is not going to be sufficient. Mr. Mono, it is not your responsibility, but let me just send a message, because we apparently can't get calls returned from TSA. But if you know, if you're dealing with other agencies, if TSA is dealing with other agencies in the same manner that it is dealing with perhaps some members of Congress, and for your customers, the people that go through your screening at the airport, it's business as usual. And it's not a learning organization that is trying to improve the way that it deals with in the airport that I go through, which is a test site for the implementation of federal takeover of the airports. It has been very disappointing, the willingness through some very unfortunate circumstances, the response from TSA to take a look at these opportunities and say, you know, this hasn't worked very well, and you know, we really would like to sit down and interact with the folks who have experienced this so that we can become a better agency to serve the public better. The response from TSA, and again, you're the person here, and it's not your area of responsibility, but this is the only way I can send the message, is that it's disappointing. And it says to me, this is an agency that's working more like old bureaucracy than new bureaucracy. Mr. Green, we're talking about all the information sharing. How many undocumented illegal aliens do we have in the United States that we don't have much information on, if any?
I think the commissioner has testified in the neighborhood of 7 million.
Okay. I mean, I just, Mr. Governor Gilmore, does that worry you?
I beg your pardon?
Does that worry you?
7 million.
7 million.
It's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. I mean, I think what we need to be taking a look at is we've got some other issues here. No matter how good we get at information sharing on the people that are in the database, that if we get to be very, very good at you know, connecting the dots at the people that are in the database, there are a whole lot of folks that, or there are a lot of ways to slip into this country which are outside of the databases, and that somewhere within Congress, and I would guess as part of the national strategy on domestic or against terrorism, we're going to have to acknowledge that, and that we are going to have to find a way to deal with, you know, up to 7 million people who entered the country and have gotten here illegally.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, Congressman, I apologize for interrupting, and this will not come out of your time.
Okay.
But there is a vote underway in the Senate. We have approximately 6 minutes left, so Senator Shelby and I are going to have to leave for that. Senator Shelby has asked if he could commence his questioning when we reconvene at 2 o'clock this afternoon. I will turn the gavel over to Congressman Goss to conclude the morning session, and we will join you at 2 o'clock.
The final issue that I just want to address is Ambassador Taylor, is that due to the increased threats to Americans in the late spring and early summer of 2001 and the Taliban's provision of sanctuary to the UBL and al-Qaeda, a demarche was issued by the State Department to the Taliban asserting that we would hold the Taliban responsible for any attacks on Americans by UBL terrorists during or after that time. In a letter to the State Department on June 18, the Joint Inquiry Staff Director requested that demarche, but we have not yet received it. Can you give us some information as to why we haven't received that document and what response you received from the Taliban?
Certainly, sir. You're referring to a demarche that was delivered, I believe, on the 29th of June by Ambassador in Islamabad. The response we received was that...
what was the content of the demarche?
Essentially, as you outlined it, that we were very much concerned about indications of terrorist planning coming from bin Laden and al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, and that we would hold the Taliban accountable, responsible for any terrorism planned or executed by al-Qaeda from the territory of Afghanistan. The response in general was that the Taliban were looking for evidence that bin Laden had indeed been involved in such activity. They did not believe it, that he could threaten the United States from Afghanistan, and they indicated they had no evidence to support our concern.
We received a written response from them as well?
No, sir. I can't recall whether it was written or verbal. There was a written response that was translated, but my colleague tells me quite confused. That request is in for declassification, I believe, and as soon as I believe that decision is forthcoming very shortly, and that cable will be provided to the committee.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes my questioning. Thank you very much.